Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Let's go discover Alaska with Annie, presented by NatHab's Guide Development Director and Expedition Leader, Annie Van Dinther. And today she is joined by Expedition Leader Drew Hamilton. It's a pleasure to have you both here today. Annie, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you so much, Kendall, and thanks for all your help in getting this set up. Today, we're going to talk about 3 of our Alaska itineraries. They're not all of our Alaska itineraries, but they are 3 very different ones. And I could not think of a better guest than Drew Hamilton to join me to discuss this. Not only are we good friends and coworkers, but Drew and I have led the Alaska Ultimate Safari together. And of course, he has spent quite a bit of time on the Grizzly boat. So Drew, thank you so much for joining me. How is it up in Anchorage today?
Well, thanks for having me. We're having a kind of classic Alaskan spring day. Earlier, the sun was out, then it was snowing sideways, and then we had an earthquake, 5.3 just up the way. So that's kind of spiced up our rehearsal a little bit. So yeah, we're feeling like it's a good day to go through and look at what Alaska looks like in the summertime. So it was really a lot of fun going through and seeing all the flowers and the green grass and shrubs and things like that. When I look out the window here, it's just white.
Yeah, we've got the same thing down here in Homer, 2 inches of snow, and but still that nice sunshine coming out down here. So hopefully it's gonna still feel like spring. So Drew, before we get started into the details of these itineraries, I do think we should talk a little bit about our homestay here and just how big it is. I think we need to help people understand that.
How big is it, Penny?
How big is it, right? Look at this compared to the lower 48. We're talking about almost as many square miles as there are people in this beautiful state of ours. And let's see, I'm losing my cursor here. There we go. And we've got more caribou. You know what, guys? I have to take 1 second here. I think somehow I am in a different presentation form. And so I really apologize for the technical difficulties, but we're gonna start in a different way because the slideshow wants to present without me. We're not gonna let it do that. So here we go. Let's try this one more time. My apologies for that. Back to how big Alaska is. We've got almost 700,000 square miles. We have more caribou than we do people. We have I found this out just today, we have the highest disparity between males and females, humans, of any other state, of 107 males to 100 females on average. That's a little bit interesting to me. And
that's why they always say the odds are good, but the goods are odd, Annie.
There you go. There you go. I think that's very true, actually. Something is going on with my presentation today, so we're just going to make it through this because we've got a little bit of a mind of its own happening. We'll have to sort through those technical details another time, but for now, Drew and I are going to be able to roll with it. Look at that. They're switching all over the place. Alaska is broken up into several different zones. And we're going to talk about some of these, the interior and south central being 2 of the biggest things that we'll be using as we go into this and look at the different itineraries here. Now, one of the first, man, it's just flipping through. I think that I have a possessed screen today, guys. I'm really sorry about that. One of the first itineraries we want to talk about is the Alaska Explorer. But we are also going to be discussing the Ultimate Wildlife Safari, and we will be talking about the Wild Alaska Grizzly Encounter. So these are the 3 itineraries that we're going to discuss today, and we'll just let you know what's going on those and hopefully kind of give some good information about them. And if we try really hard, we're going to leave room at the end so that people can ask questions about these itineraries, because I think that's kind of one of the things that people are really looking for. We're going to start with the Alex trip, the Alaska Explorer. And this is really cool. You got to go back to that word South Central, because this trip, I'll see if my cursor works for this here, really gets focused in the South Central area. So other trips that explore more broadly, well, the Ultimate Safari, this one focuses in The Alaska Explorer starts in Anchorage, moves down to Alyeska really quickly. You don't even spend a night in Anchorage on this trip. Then you head down the Kenai Peninsula, which is where I live. And then you go over to Whittier and the Prince William Sound area. So Alyeska, Drew, you've spent some time there at Alyeska. This is kind of a pretty special place here.
Sorry, the doorbell rang. So the kids are letting me know someone's there. Alyeska is a ton of fun. There are a couple different trips to go. Come here.
I'll take the Alyeska talk. You see if you can get the dogs calmed down. This is a classic Alaska presentation, I think, today, because we've got earthquakes, dogs, and technical difficulties. So we hope you guys can be patient through that. Alyeska is really unique compared to a lot of the other lodges around Alaska because it actually makes most of its money during the winter time. It's a ski resort. And it's a pretty exciting place for those of us that live in Alaska because it's a great place for us to go during the winter months. For our guests, it is a beautiful facility that is located about 45 minutes outside of Anchorage. And it really kind of is at the edge with some temperate rainforest there and some boreal forest. It's a great place for us to begin the Alaska Explorer adventure. Now, we're going to go from Alyeska and then head down the Kenai Peninsula. And I don't think that you can really understand how incredible that area is without a little bit of focus on these wildflowers. There's going to be lupin, there's going to be fireweed, there's going to be pushki, which is also called cow parsnip. And this is a plant that the flowers can get to be this big. It's really kind of fits that maybe stereotype that some people have of Alaska of like, you know, plants growing super huge and just waist high kind of walking through things. So I'm excited for people to head down the Kenai and just get to see how beautiful it is relative to the wildflowers. What about you, Drew? When you think about the Kenai and our guests, what are you thinking of that you would just be really wanting to share with them?
It really is. So the Kenai Peninsula is Alaska's playground, and that's where I spent a good part of the last 20 years doing my own personal adventures. And so when we were crafting this itinerary, there was a lot of input from local Alaskan guides, and we were able to chat and kind of make our list of the greatest hits of the Kenai Peninsula and put them all together into one itinerary. So it's been a ton of fun seeing this come together, and I'm excited to go do it.
I could not agree more. This is where we go play. So, you know, as Alaskans, of course, we're excited to go check out Denali and some of the kind of course, Katmai, right? Those kinds of places. But the Kenai Peninsula is where I bring my kids to go on adventures, right? I live in Homer, which is on the Kenai Peninsula. And this is a photo here of the Skilak Wilderness area. And it is a really special place where we will be bringing our guests. You can see Kenai Lake from there. I saw a little black bear scooting around last time I was there, and we were there for picking morels. There's other things on the Kenai that can be really interesting to see because it's a unique place relative to, as Drew said, where Alaskans live and adventure. And you just get glorious views of the inlet. You get beautiful views of the mountains and the ocean. And it ends up being an exploration in light in some ways when you're looking at it from a photography perspective. Now, once we do the Kenai part, then we're going to head back up the road a little bit and we're going to head over to Prince William Sound. This is where we got to admit we haven't done this trip before. And so we're sharing some pictures from the operators. We're sharing pictures of animals that we know you will see. But for us, it's going to be a new adventure. So we don't have quite the same images that we do for some of the other adventures where we can show you guests, you know, already enjoying this place. But new adventures are often the best ones. So in Prince William Sound, you're going to have the opportunity to be kayaking along temperate rainforest. And there are incredible animals that you would have the opportunity to see. Moose is one animal we got to talk about. So whether you're on the Kenai or whether you're in Prince William Sound, I have a feeling you're going to come on this trip and you're going to have moose on the list of things that you want to see. Drew, how many times have you successfully brought guests to see moose, do you think, of the times you've tried?
You know, moose are so tough because they are one of the more numerous animals that we're looking for or that exist. You know, we have a lot of moose in Alaska. It seems that they know when you're looking for them. So you just got to be ready at any moment because they're everywhere and they're nowhere at the same time. So I just tell everybody to have your cameras ready. There will be a moose pop out at some point, and at that point, the best camera to have is the one in your hand. And so a lot of the moose viewing is opportunistic, whether we're just pulling over on the side of the road or you know, catching one on a hike. But there's really no place on the itinerary where you can say specifically, we will see a moose there, because they can turn up just about anywhere.
You know, when I was thinking about this is actually a picture from a moose in my yard, because I was thinking, you know, I probably have moose in my yard maybe even 6 out of 7 days this time of year, but it doesn't mean I could invite somebody over to see a moose with me. And that is one of the most frustrating things about them, because as you said, they're prolific. In many ways, they're everywhere. We worry about walking down the street relative to where moose might be, but at the same time, I can't plan on when I'm going to show guests the moose. So this is something we will be looking for all along the Kenai and in Prince William Sound. And I just really hope we manage to find a way to share this incredible animal with our guests. Now, when our guests head into Prince William Sound, puffin are going to be one of the birds that they're going to be looking for. There's going to be rookeries, and it's going to be, you know, puffin, kittiwake, cormorants, all kinds of incredible shorebirds. So I'm really excited to share that place with people relative to the birds for sure. But there's another animal that I'm most excited to be able to share with our guests in Prince William Sound. And it's not sea lions, even though they're really, really cool, and I can't wait for guests to understand this animal. It's not the intertidal zone, although that too is really special. When you come to Alaska, we have some of the largest tides in North America. And we get to see amazing animals when we go check out the intertidal zone. The eagles are incredible. That's one of the animals I can't wait to show people, but it's still not the one that I'm most excited about. That is going to be the whales. For me, this is the animal that I have been most passionate about in my career. Getting to see orca, getting to see humpback whales, and many other species that could possibly be in Prince William Sound, that's going to be one of the most exciting parts for me. For you, Drew, you've spent quite a bit of time watching whales. I know that bears would be your answer for that question, but tell me what it's like for you when you're viewing whales. What are you thinking about?
Well, so part of whale watching for me is just being out in these magnificent areas. I mean, you go some places in the lower 48 to see whales, and it might have some nice scenery and things like that. But the landscape in Prince William Sound is just stunning. You've got mountains, you've got glaciers. It's kind of the whole package. And one of the, you know, I do a lot of photo trips, and so one of the things I always try to emphasize for people who are snapping photos is to zoom a little bit wider. One, it's easier to get the whale in the frame if you just get them for a little bit. But you are trying to take a picture of the scene, and when you go back through, the ones that capture some of the place are going to be the ones that jump out at you as well after the fact.
That's exactly right. Some of these shots that I've shown here kind of zone right in. And there's a shot that you took in Resurrection Bay, actually, on the safari that we'll get to in a minute. That is a perfect example of getting the landscape in with the actual animals that you're seeing, which tells the whole story, right? For me, the humpback whales and getting to see their social feeding patterns, that's one of the most exciting things. Getting to understand who the individuals are. I love that part of it. But otters often steal the show as well. These guys are so cute and just so much fun to watch. I absolutely love seeing them. And then learning about Alaskan history via otters is also, I think, a really cool thing, because they have a lot to do with why our state is here. So that's one of the things I would want to be sharing with guests on this itinerary. Now, there are foods that we are absolutely dependent on here in Alaska. And I think one of the things that's really cool about this Alex trip is that guests are going to start to get a glimpse of what it is like to live in Alaska. And chicken of the woods, this mushroom that you see on the side of this tree, this is one of the foods that we absolutely love to harvest. We talked about morels up in the Ski Lac Wilderness area. You know, salmon, you're going to see fisheries in Prince William Sound. You're going to actually witness this huge fishing season that happens. Like, you can't be there without witnessing the fisheries. And I think that's also going to be a really cool experience for guests. Now, we talked about the Alex trip, the Alaska Explorer. That's kind of my short term for it, is the Alex trip. We talked about the Alaska Explorer and how it focuses in on South Central. The Alaska Ultimate Safari, man, if there is an epic Alaskan adventure, this would be it, right? Like, talk about a trip. It focuses, starts up here in Fairbanks, and then you're gonna head down to Denali, then you're gonna head over to Alyeska, then you're gonna head all the way over to the Katmai area. So it's an incredible journey that ends up taking, you know, a great distance. I think we have almost 1,500 miles traveled on that one itinerary. And you're gonna see a bunch of different ecosystems. So Drew, you did this trip, you guided this trip a few years ago, and the next images that we're gonna see are of an adventure that you took with some of our, of course, wonderful guests. So tell us about this adventure.
So to start, I kind of want to go back. You don't have to go back, but I'm going to go back and talk about that slide that broke down Alaska into its 5 regions. And Alaska is so big. It really, you could spend your whole life exploring Alaska and still not see it all. And so the Alex trip and the Grizzly ship that we're going to talk about next are just kind of breaking down into specific regions. This is the only trip in the catalog that really visits multiple regions in the state of Alaska. And so I think of it as a good primer for people coming to Alaska. Maybe if you've been here before and you want to see something specific again, it's on the itinerary. But so yeah, it does start in Fairbanks. You're met by some guy at the Fairbanks airport, and we do our welcome dinner and things like that. So for talking about this trip, basically what I did is I went back to one of the digital online photo albums that I made for one of the trips a couple of years ago, and kind of it's fun to go back and relive it. So you're gonna see a lot of the same people over and over through the next few slides. So we hop on a bus in Fairbanks and start heading down to Denali, and we just start with the elephant in the room. One of the landmarks right outside Fairbanks, and everybody knows we always have to stop a picture, is Skinny Dick's Halfway In. Now Alaska is full of characters. We're going to make a bunch of them on this trip. Skinny Dick, before he passed away, was one of those characters, and this is still there, kind of as an homage to, well, yeah. Anyway, next slide. So we head down to Denali. We take in lunch before we go and hop on the bus. You know, we start talking about all the things, the Alaskana. We make a lot of jokes about the mosquitoes being the state bird and things like that. But this is a good place just to get our boots on the ground in Denali, and then we hop on the bus and start into the park. Here you see Rusty and Kathy, one of the more famous overlooks in the park. This is at Polychrome Pass, which is just kind of stunning. That's where you really get the first feel of just the scale and the grandeur of Denali. Now the wildlife starts to pop out again. It's one of those places where, you know, the wildlife isn't necessarily always right in your face, but you need to be ready at a moment's notice, because you never know when there's going to be a lone caribou walking up the road right at you or something like that. So just be ready at all times. Now, of course, Denali is why we go to Denali. Denali, of course, is the highest mountain in North America, but it can be the most elusive thing we're looking for on this whole itinerary, in that it is covered with clouds. It's so big, it creates its own weather, often obscured. So this, I chose this picture intentionally because this is, you always see the Ansel Adams and things like that of just this spectacular. But a lot of times it does have some clouds for good portions of it. There have been trips that we didn't see Denali. So you just have to be prepared. And when it does come out, you usually get an alert, head up, go to Reflections Lake, and start taking pictures. So this is the picture we took of the previous slide. So that was the behind the scenes before the scenes.
I definitely find that, going to view Denali it has eluded me personally. We have other guides who, Mike Hillman, every time he goes, he sees the mountain. So I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's hit or miss, right? You just never know when you go if that weather system is going to open up for you. Now this is a picture of us leaving Denali and heading down to Talkeetna. Tell me about this.
So if you've ever gone on any of the Churchill Aurora trips or anything like that with me, you know that I am a fan of trains. So this is one of the highlights for me. I always love riding on trains. And so it's really nice to be able to come out of the park and not have to pile right back onto the bus and start driving again. So we hop on the train and it's this nice leisurely ride, like nobody has to worry about driving. You can look wherever, and there are a lot of nice scenery that you don't see from the road because it does take a different route. So it gives you a little different view of things. So we take the train down to the lovely town of Talkeetna, where we now this is another favorite, kind of a hidden gem in this itinerary. For those of you who don't know Talkeetna, it is the town upon which Sicily, Alaska is based, from the show Northern Exposure. So what we do is we spend a lot of time just kind of wandering around town, taking in the sights. There are some good views of Denali if it's out from there, but we take in some of the cuisine, we take in some of the kind of quirky aspects of it. There are a lot of flowers in the summer. I just put this in for a splash of color on this cold and snowy day here in Anchorage. Now, as you're walking around town, you do have all these iconic Alaskan places. Dagley's General Store is where Mayor Stubbs resided. For those of you who don't know, the mayor of Talkeetna for many years was a cat named Stubbs who lived in Dagley's store. Did pass away, so I'm not sure maybe they're having a runoff election. I don't know who's going to win. We'll know after all the votes are counted.
I have a feeling it won't be a human, but I don't know. I just think they love that tradition so much. I'm not sure they're going to choose a human species for their next mayor, but that definitely speaks to the quirkiness of this beautiful little Alaskan town. And then this one, Drew, I have never seen this one. You got to tell me about this part.
Oh, on this road trip, we talked about the quirky Alaskan things that you encounter. This was just on this particular trip, driving down the highway and the magic bus, and I'll be danged if we didn't run into a guy in a gorilla costume, Batmobile. So you can't not stop when you see a guy in a gorilla costume with the Batmobiles. We went over and snapped some pics with the Batmobile. Yeah, you just got to be ready for anything.
And this looks like you're getting ready for the Glacier Trip here. Am I right about that?
Yeah, so we head on down to Alyeska that we talked about before. There's some overlaps. So we stay at Alyeska Hotel and we get on another train and we head out to Spencer Glacier, where we spend some time with some of the big icebergs that are coming off this glacier. And then we do a nice scenic float all the way back to where the train picks us up and takes us back to the hotel. So these are the behind the scenes. We're snapping pictures of each other. We were all dressed appropriately for the weather. It's this beautiful glacial valley that we float through. There are eagles. Yeah, it's definitely a highlight. And it's all done, a couple train trips in there. And this trip really does encompass the planes, trains, and automobiles aspects of travel in Alaska.
And that's something that's important to point out, that, that's one of the things that could shift a little bit for this itinerary this next summer, because a lot of Alaska businesses are recovering and kind of, figuring out this new world like everybody else is. There might be some aspects of the terrain on some of the trips that shift a little bit. Either way, one of my favorite things about heading down to see that glacier is you are watching succession, which is something we talk quite a bit when we learn about glaciers and we learn about fires. Like when the plants come in after, you can really see it when you take that trip, which is super cool. So what about this? Tell me about where you guys are at this point in the adventure.
Oh, so this is in Girdwood. We've got a night where folks can go out on their own and explore a little bit. And so there was some live music going on in Girdwood, as there often is, and looks like Gary, Ginny, and Kathy and Rusty are all out on the town taking in some tunes.
That's one of my favorite things about this trip is that we do have 2 nights built in where guests can go and do some exploring on their own and go choose the restaurant they want to, or just take a night of rest, because it is a lot of travel on this trip. And I think oftentimes guests really enjoy that aspect. Now, this is a spot that I had never been to until I went on a trip with you. So tell us about this spot.
So this is all the guides who do this trip, their own little secret spot, so to speak, that they like to go off the beaten path a little bit and share. And this is one that I've been going to for years and love to share with groups. This is the canyon at 6 Mile Creek, which is just off the road on our route, but you wouldn't even know where to stop. I had to tell the bus driver where to pull over, and we walk through the woods, and boom, you're at this stunning gorge with this stream going through it. And so particularly on the photo trips, I like to pull over right here, and we practice long exposures and things like that, just to set us up photographically for some of the other things encounter later in the trip. So it's just one of those hidden gems that each guide will be able to add their own flair to this itinerary.
So one of the reasons we love working with Natural Habitat, because we get to be ourselves as guides. Now, that was on your way down the peninsula and heading towards Seward. And this is the place where guests get to stay when we go to Seward. And I have to say, it's one of my most favorite places.
This is a stunning spot out on Fox Island. Like it's one of the things that I always wanted to do and never got to do until I was doing these NatHab trips. Just fantastic food, fantastic vistas. The next day we go on a whale watching trip where they'll come pick us up right here. We go kayaking, and we've had orcas and puffins and things like that all seen right from the lodge. So it is just this little spot out on the island that we call home. I tried to take it from the back of the kayak, so sorry it's not straight. But yeah, we were just out cruising around on a beautiful day in Resurrection Bay. So then, yeah, the next day, we'll go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think we're about to say the same thing. Then we get to head out and go find some glaciers. I think this is Holgate Glacier, and this is when you and I did the trip together. And it's just a beautiful opportunity for our group to get close up. Tell us about this particular experience.
Oh, this is just, we're 2/3 of the way through the trip, and we're all having a good time. So we pulled over for a toast at a glacier. And when you're out there, even these photos, they just don't capture the scale of these glaciers. I mean, you're out there, and they can be many stories high, and they're in these fjords. This is the Kenai Fjords National Park, so a lot of times you'll go around the corner, boom, there's another one right there that you didn't even expect. This actually, I think, is Surprise Glacier, because they call it Surprise Glacier because it's when you're looking at one straight in front of you and you pull up a little further, boom, there's a Surprise Glacier right to the left.
So very cool. And there's actually some really cool information that we wanted to share about a glacier actually up in Denali. The Muldrow Glacier is currently surging. And so with this webinar, a little bit later, Kendall is going to share a link with everybody so that they can watch a little video on what's happening with that glacier. Along all of these adventures, I think learning about glaciers is probably one of the most precious opportunities that I personally love when we're traveling through Alaska. It just seems like you're seeing sort of, I don't know, like a part of history unfolding right in front of your eyes. So really cool part. Now here's that shot we talked about earlier where you've got some of the landscape right behind these two gorgeous humpback whales. Tell us about this.
Well, so, you know, you look for orcas, you look for humpbacks, you look for minke whales, you look for fin whales. I've seen salmon sharks out there. Like, there's just so much going on in Kenai Fjords National Park. And a kind of funny side note about this day is I usually roll with about a 600mm lens on camera. And this was really the whale shot I got that day because they're just too damn close. So everybody else was better set up and has better pictures than I do for that day because I'm shooting with the 600mm, so everything's real small. So I had to wait for the whales to get far enough away to take their picture.
I had this same experience in Resurrection Bay. I didn't have a 600, but even with my 400, I found that we had some orcas come closer to the boat, and I was like, I can't get any of these shots because it was just too close. And I think that's one of the things I would say about Resurrection Bay is you just feel like you're in it. Like the ecosystem is just so, it's like bubbling over with life. And so no matter where you are, there's something happening when you're in Resurrection Bay. And whether it's with the birds or it's with the whales or it's with the sea lions, like otters, it's just kind of off the hook.
And
Okay,
a
wait.
couple sea lion rookeries. Oh,
What about this one,
a
Drew?
couple sea lion we go check out. So we enjoy our time out at Fox Island, and we all hop on our orcas and head back into town.
Okay, and then we've got to get ready for the next leg of this adventure, which is actually heading over to Brooks.
So we'll go back up to Anchorage and then fly commercially out to the town of King Salmon, which is out in southwest Alaska.
Tell us about this photo.
As soon as you hit the ground at Brooks, you have bear viewing opportunities. It's not common to have bear jams and things like that. Bears at Brooks are potentially everywhere. So you just gotta be ready for anything. We'll go out to the platform, do the traditional Brooks bear viewing, but we'll also spend some time down on ground level, kind of bopping around here and there, trying to get some of their shots. But this is kind of the classic scenario. This is right at the lodge, looking out over Naknek Lake. Two large male bears sparring out in the middle of the lake, taking a break from fishing. Again, it feels like you're right in it.
Yeah, I would say that that's a really good way to say it. And there is an image that I've never been able to capture, but that many people want to capture when they go to Brooks Falls. And you did manage to capture that image. So tell us about this one.
This is kind of the iconic image made famous by Tom Engelson back in the 80s. He was one of the first ones to really popularize this shot, and in a lot of ways made Brooks what it is today. And this is the only place, and this is the only trip on the itinerary, or only trip in our catalog where you can get that iconic shot of the bear snapping the salmon right out of midair. Brooks is the only place to get that, and then this is the itinerary. If this shot is on your list, this is the itinerary for you. So we'll spend time out there, and I do have some tricks, photographic tricks that I'll share with people for getting this shot. You know, we always want to send people home with the trophy shot for the wall, and that's usually where that one comes from. So, and it's this historic lodge right there at Brooks. There's the trading post where you buy all your souvenirs, like your bear hats that Gary was wearing.
And it's also the place at Brooks where you're going to see people coming and going, and right there amidst, there's the bears. It's one of the things I love the most is I think it's sort of this incredible social experiment where you can have people visiting this national park and the bears are just doing what they're doing. Getting the chance to see bears that close up and to be able to be on the ground with them and watching us humans move successfully through their space, I think it's one of my most favorite things about this trip. It's really where I kind of fell in love with brown bears in a whole different way. because getting to kind of witness them in this zone is just such a privilege. And you start to see who they are. You start to see who the individuals are and what they, how they're kind of carving out a space. These little cubs were next to a female who was determined to be at the upper falls with the space that is usually dominant males. And so that's one of my favorite things about the animal behavior on this trip, is just getting to witness who's who amongst the bears and starting to understand that system a little bit more. But if it's bears you want, and only bears you want, then there's another trip that we would highly recommend. Tell us about this area, Drew.
So the next trip I want to talk about is the Grizzly ship adventure. And this really is kind of the question that I get a lot. And people asking, like, what's the difference in the itineraries, things like that. And the Ultimate Alaska Safari we were just talking about is this expansive expedition across Alaska. And then the Grizzly ship just takes one section, a small section of Alaska, the Kodiak Archipelago and the north end of the Alaska Peninsula, boils it down to just the essence of bear. And so the trip starts in Kodiak and ends in Kodiak. And then we hop in little float planes, we get everybody waitered up, and then we spend the next few days just watching bears in a very immersive way. And so when I was going through, and I've seen all the catalogs and things like that, and there are so many of the springtime shots that Brad Joseph specializes in the catalog. So I've really tried to focus, because this trip is so different in June versus August or September. So I really tried to focus on putting some of the more late season, late July into August, September, maybe even, so you can see some of the different behaviors and things like that. But really, here's a picture of the ship with our welcome committee right out front. So being on this ship really does provide us access to locations that you just can't get to any other way, and you're out in the elements. We are walking through, everybody's wearing their chest waders and things like that. And you really are right in it. Here we've got a group of folks, the bears don't care that we're there. It's this process of repeated benign interaction, so they're going about their bear business. And as long as we're well behaved, it doesn't affect them at all. So small groups of well-behaved humans is what we endeavor to be. Now these next few shots, I think, were all taken in that exact spot, is why I put the group of people, and these were all the shots we got from just there. So this is one of the bears that was playing. This is a backlit scenario. It was a bright sunny day, but by having it backlit and overexposed, they're able to make it look kind of like a foggy, misty day, but it was really quite bright.
Ooh.
Say hi, this is actually, no, this is the other one. And they were doing these laps and running and chasing each other through the intertidal there, came and looped over. This is actually a stitched shot. We talked about how, there's certain proximity. If I'm shooting with a fixed 600mm lens, this is actually 3 shots taken vertically and then stitched together to make one final image, which is one of the things we'll talk about how to do on the photo trips, and even more on the new Photo Pro trips. Yeah, and if you look the other way, here comes this bear out of the grass. This was just a cute little female that was kind of trying to figure out how to get into the stream with, while still being able to avoid some of the bigger, more dominant bears. So she was over on the periphery a lot. We call it Fluffy.
I love the anticipation in the look on this bear's face. Like, you can just tell that she's, do I get to go play too, guys? Like, it's the look on her face is just priceless. I absolutely love it. Ooh,
you can see the wheels turning.
Yeah.
We got this again is in that exact same spot. We got big bears, we got small bears, we got them all. This is a particularly large male that you'll notice. So you can tell this is taken later in the summer because he's got that very even kind of medium length coat. One of the things I like about the late season trips is they have already shed and regrown their fur later in the season. So if you open up the dictionary and look up brown bear, you're probably going to see a picture of this guy right here, because this is what bears are supposed to look
There's other wildlife there too.
like. Yeah. Oh, and this is another late season when we go a little further down the coast. There is a seal haul out, very, very tolerant seals, and so we go out in the skiff, get right down at eye level with them, so you can do some fun still non-bear photography, as we like to classify it.
Very, very cool. You know, I would say that when I was over in Katmai, of course, the bears were just so amazing. I did get to work on one of these Grizzly encounter trips with Sean Eggleston, but also the intertidal zone, because you're moving through a lot of this space on small boats, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. But these guys are the best.
And the cubs are super cute at that time. This is actually later season, but up at the north end of the coast. So this is in Hallow Bay. And the cubs are super curious at this point in the year. They're not just glued to mom. This is where you start to see their personalities come out. So this was part of a fearsome threesome of triplets that year that are now several years old, and one of them's turned into a handful of a bear. But it's fun to look back and look at the baby pictures as well. So yeah, these guys, it was so much fun, because the two other cubs, well, here they are again. They were following mom, grazing on sedge in between fishing bouts, and the smallest one, was so curious about us, would keep coming and checking us out, and like pretend like it's eating the sedge, but it was really checking us out the whole time.
That's fantastic. Tell us about this image. I love the plane that you're on with this bear, and I think that's one of the really special things about the Grizzly encounter is you're just right there on the ground with them. You're not looking at them from a platform, which is a great experience, but it is different.
Yeah, so it is very different being just right at eye level or even below on this shot. And actually, I think the next slide is how we got this shot. You are right in at ground level and sometimes lower. This shot's taken out. This technically we're probably below sea level for this shot, because we are out in the intertidal, laying on our bellies in the sand on one of the gravel bars, and they're just bears fishing all around us. And so it does provide some of these amazing opportunities. Here we are with a crew. Well, there's Wendy from the office. Maybe she's watching today. Well, we're putting in her family photos here. So yeah, this is kind of the behind the scenes, and this is actually what a guide's view looks like of most of these trips. I do see a lot of the backs of people's heads for most of the trips. Memories.
What about this guy?
So this is in that exact same spot. All of that female bear that we're looking at from below eye level, while we're watching her, this bear came behind us onto the other gravel bar. So we're getting very cool reflections. This is a little subadult female. She's still out there kicking around. This is also a late season shot. So you can see that the cubs are particularly fluffy by this point. This one will probably end of August, maybe getting there in September. We're also starting to see some fall colors poking out. The fireweed starts to turn. The willows start to turn, so you get some very dynamic landscape shots in there as well. And then when you're out on the coast, you just have to be ready for anything. I know I've said that a bunch during this webinar, but you never know who's going to pop out. There are spots on the coast where it's not uncommon to have wolves come fish with the bears, and if we're lucky, we'll get to see them. We got to spend a day with this is a male wolf that was bopping around, coming and going from the grass. We'd go snatch a fish out of the river, and then just doing what wolves do.
And this picture is just phenomenal. I feel like this is, again, this just shows how you feel like you're right there with these animals. I mean, you are right there with them, and the look on this bear's face. This is like deep thoughts.
Yeah, this is a different cub of the year that, yeah, they're just so curious at that point. They've kind of gotten over their initial wonder and just getting close to mom, and then kind of range a little bit further sometimes depending on the bears. But they do like to check us out and come over and say hi sometimes.
Drew, do you have a favorite bear over in Katmai?
Whatever bear's in front of me is my favorite.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, here's another late season. You see that her fur is growing back. She's got that nice even coat. Her cubs were stashed just off to our left as she was fishing in the stream right in front of us here.
I would say one of my favorite things as a mom about watching bears is understanding the different bear mom approaches and that they're not all the same. Like humans, right? You can think of 5 different moms that you know, and they parent differently. They have different ways of interacting with their kids, different levels of protectiveness. There's sort of this idea out here that bear mom is like they're all super protective, and I think it was really one of my most favorite things when I learned about a bear mom that really wasn't that protective. She was easily distracted and more focused on fish and male bears than she was on her cubs. And I just think it's so fascinating to learn about the different individuals and the way that they're adapting to that environment. And I would say that would be my personal favorite thing about this Grizzly ship is that, as you said, you're just immersed in the world of bears. And you're going to start to get a sense of their way of being in the world, which is just so fascinating.
First couple days on the Grizzly ship, we really do spend time breaking down what people think they know about bears. You know, they come in with one thing in mind, and then you get there and you realize it's not just different. Sometimes it's the complete opposite. And just like you're talking, the mother bears in particular really go against what people think what the preconceived notions are. And you know, you talk about, you know, everybody says don't mess with mom and cubs and things like that. But you know, what we're seeing out here is behavior called refuging, where a lot of times moms with cubs will actually seek out these small groups of well-behaved humans because we are more predictable than the other bears in their sphere. And so we are kind of like security for them. There's no other bear that's going to come through us to get to their cubs, so they're actually using us as part of their safety equation.
You know, I've seen that with humpback whales quite a bit too. When a mom is busy feeding, she will leave a small calf with a whale watching boat. She knows the boat's out there, right? And she knows the whale watching boat shows up with great predictability and is careful around her and moves in a very different way than a boat that's buzzing through. And yeah, we will often experience where the mom will sort of bring the calf over to the boat so that she can go get her fishing done. And it's like, wait, I think we just became the whale daycare. Because sure enough, the calf will get curious about the boat and want to kind of hang out, and probably knows very well through communication that mom is going to be busy fishing for a bit and this is a safe place to be. And so, yeah, whether you're on this Grizzly trip or whether you are on the trip that heads to Prince William Sound, the Alaska Explorer, where you're going to get to see maybe some of those humpbacks behaving in that way, or you're on the ultimate safari where you're going to get a little bit of all of this, it is understanding that Alaska is inherently a wild place and the animals still have a home here that we fit into rather than the other way around. And so I think that is ultimately, when you pull back from all the trips, what is probably the most special experience you could have no matter what itinerary you choose. So Drew, I think we've come to the point where we can open it up for questions. Are you ready to see what our guests have in terms of questions for us?
I hope there are no story problems, but yeah.
Okay, we'll see. I think you might have just called one on, but we'll see how that goes. Kendall, we are ready for questions if you'd like to open it up.
Great. Yeah, we've got a lot of good questions for you. And I just want to remind everyone who's watching, if you have a question today, you can submit those in your control panel under the questions field. And also, just for everyone watching, I'm going to, in the chat box, send out the link to the Glacier Surge video that was mentioned earlier. And also, I'll provide it in the replay email notification. Okay. There are a few questions about the different trips, so I'm going to get started with those in case people have to head out the door soon. So on the Grizzly ship trip, which is the Wild Alaska Grizzly Encounter, what is the difficulty of the hikes and how long do you stay out there?
So it's not necessarily, so there are some challenging terrains that we cover on that, whether we're walking through, say, knee-deep water or crossing streams or things like that. I would say that the challenges are not necessarily endurance challenges. It's not like we're doing a forced death march up a river or something like that. It's more just dealing with the terrain. And so if you're somebody that is not necessarily as sure on your feet, it might not be the trip for you because we are stepping over logs, we're crossing rivers, things like that. A lot of the trails we use were crafted by bears who don't put a lot of thought into human traffic as well. So there's going through bushes and things like that, and that is part of the adventure. But it is something your adventure specialist will be able to talk you through specifically, and you can describe your mobility to them, and then they can suggest which is the right itinerary for you.
You know, I have to say, in my experience, I almost think, in an interesting way, I almost think that getting to the Grizzlies is easier on the Grizzly Encounter than it is when you're in Brooks. In Brooks, we do, to get to that Upper Falls, you need to be able to hike. I think it's a mile each direction, correct? So it is a longer walk. Now, you're not going to be in waders doing that, and you can, you know, it's a trail made by humans that is smooth and, you know, pretty easy to walk on. But the distance wise, that trip actually does have a greater distance that you need to be able to hike. The Grizzly ship, just as Drew said here, it's all about maneuvering in waders. And so even though you may be walking a shorter distance, you got to be able to walk in waders. That's just kind of, you're going to be in those every day. And so I think that's kind of one of the little details or differences that I would say about those two trips.
And if you're on a trip with Sean Eggleston, just tell him that Drew said he would carry you.
Got it. So what hiking opportunities are available on Alaska Explorer or Ultimate Alaska?
So for those two trips, there's going to be opportunity. Now, when you get to Alyeska, which is true of both trips, there's an excellent hiking opportunity there. And in fact, that's a place where, depending on your hiking abilities, there could be an opportunity for you to go, you know, farther and higher. There's a chance for us to find a private guide there, even if we are going to be staying with the bulk of the group. If we have people that are like, I want to hike, I want to get up there, I want to go see that, you know, higher above tree line vista, then there's ways to do that. There's also a way to do a small walk that is, you know, not so ambitious. So that's kind of one of the cool things about hiking in that particular area, is really every different level can be met. In Denali, we offer that same kind of opportunity. So whether there's a couple different places we might stay, but the guides will have in the morning sort of different level of hikes. There'll be an easy, where, you know, you're just going to be kind of walking along the side of the road and getting some opportunity to see wildlife. Or there's going to be a kind of mild, moderate, and then like an ultimate hike. And so those are going to be varying levels to meet really whatever you guests out there would like to do. And I think that's kind of the cool thing about the Ultimate Safari, is that we're able to sort of customize some of those experiences. Prince William Sound, you know, you're going to do some hiking on the Kenai part of that trip, but once you're in Prince William Sound, you're going to be on that boat. And from the boat, there could be some walks that, you know, are established, but it's really going to be about that marine experience, kayaking. If you do go for a walk, it's probably going to be a beach walk. There might be a few places where you stretch up into the forest, but it's going to be marine centric once you're in Prince William Sound. I'm really excited about the Kenai aspect because I can't wait to bring people on some of the hikes that I know about in the Ski Lac area. And our other guides will know about those as well. So I'll share some of my secret spots with them. I hope that answers those questions. A lot of variety, I guess, is the answer.
Yeah, that was excellent.
I've even had people go up Fox Island, go to the top of Fox Island.
All right, next question. This one was about one particular trip, but I'm going to open it up to all of the trips. Do you encounter other tour groups when you're out in the area?
That's an excellent question. I would say yes, for sure. We are, going to national parks and to areas where we will see other groups. At the same time, our specialty is knowing how to get off the beaten path, knowing some of these secret spots and nooks and crannies. I mean, literally, Drew took me to a place that even as an Alaskan, I had never been to. And I think that is the experience that we as natural habitat guides are constantly on the lookout for our group. Where can we, head down a little different road so that, yes, we just saw tour groups in the main area, but we know how to take a turn right here and go to this area where it's going to be more private, more secluded, and more of that small group experience that you can count on from Nat Hab. And I would say that's true of every single one of these itineraries. Would you agree with that, Drew?
Yeah, I think Brooks is the perfect example. I mean, this is the most famous bear viewing spot. It's no secret. Like, if you want that shot, that's where you got to go. But I know all of our guides are experts at maybe putting a little twist on it, or getting you in one of the corners where there just aren't people, kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's Alaska in the summer. You're going to run into other tours, but it's really just about minimizing that and still creating special experiences.
Mm-hmm. So someone's wondering how the glaciers that one might see on the ultimate Alaska trip might vary in compared to if you were just to go on a coastal cruise.
That's an interesting question, because I haven't gone on a coastal cruise, but I can tell you that what would happen is it's intimacy. It comes down to that small group experience and being able to get close to the glaciers. So if we're comparing some of those larger vessels, like I'm thinking sort of traditional cruise ship, like I'm not going to name brands here, but some, a bigger ship that needs a deep water dock kind of thing, they can't necessarily nestle into some of these more intimate experiences. So I think we get a more close up front seat. I do know that some of the larger cruise ships are allowed in the Glacier Bay area. So, when they move through there's very specific rules about how they move through, given their size. At the same time, they just can't get where the smaller boats can go. And then when you're moving through Denali and looking at the glaciers there, you're not even on a boat. So a lot of the glaciers in Alaska aren't on the coast. That would be my answer, Drew. I'm so curious. It's a great question. So I do want to hear your answer as well.
Well, and on a coastal cruise, you're going to see tidewater glaciers, which we do have. We're going to see those in Kenai Fjords. We're going to see those in Prince William Sound. But you think about like the Spencer Glacier, where we do the scenic float and we go paddle around the icebergs and things like that. It's a different kind of glacier. So it would be, I mean, yeah, they still have a lot of ice, but it is a different experience going to Spencer Glacier versus Ayalik or some of those tidewater glaciers that you're going to find on like a southeast cruise.
All right, so I'm going to end with three more questions that are about photography. So the first one is, for the ultimate trip, do you recommend, or maybe just for any trips, Drew, you can give us your recommendations. Do you think a tripod or a monopod is a good idea to bring?
I always recommend a monopod rather than a tripod, just because a tripod can be, one, you got to carry it, and if you're on some of these trips, you're carrying 1,500 miles. So a monopod is much more versatile and still gets you that stability, and like particularly at Brooks Falls, where they don't even allow tripods during the peak season. If you're there in, I think it's June, July, August, they allow monopods, but not tripods. And so yeah, the monopod is frankly just versatile. You can use it as a walking stick to get over some of those obstacles I was talking about on the Grizzly ship. And I don't know, it just always works out that as soon as you set up your tripod going one way, something interesting is going to happen behind you. So you'd be able to get the shot either handheld or with the monopod, but if you've got the tripod all set up, you're going to be tripping over it. So I recommend monopods or handhold.
Great. And do you have a zoom lens preference? Someone in particular is asking an 18 to 400 or a 150 to 600.
Well, shoot, those are both. You couldn't go wrong with either of those. Kind of the 100 to 400 is the industry standard on all of these trips. 100 to 400, as long as you've got most of that range covered. So the 150 to 600 kind of takes it to the longer end, and the other one gets you a little wider. So you're not going to go wrong with either of those. The longer lens, particularly that 150 to 600, doesn't mean you're going to be taking shots of bears that are further away. The bears are still the same distance away. It just means you're going to be that much closer to them. And so in your photographic priorities, do you want the face shot? Like, do you want to be just like this on the bear kind of thing is what you're going to be doing. And I've already said, I like to zoom a little wider and get a little environment in there. So you just have to decide what your photographic priorities, if you'd rather be up in the bear's face, kind of figuratively, or would you like to zoom a little wider, like that one you mentioned that's got the 18? That's a very versatile lens. So you can get a little wider, depending on if you're on a crop sensor or a full frame. Yeah, 18 will get you wide.
Okay, great. All right, well, I'm going to call it there with questions. Oh, go ahead, Annie.
I was just going to say, I call that 18 to 150 my workhorse. Like, that's my lens that I want to have with me always, because I'm, those experiences that Drew and I were talking about where our lenses were too big and we missed those whale shots. So I love having that wider variety available to me. I would have both of those lenses is what I would recommend for the person who's interested in that. But I love having my workhorse because I know I'm going to be able to handle the wide variety that we're dealing with when it comes to closeness and intimacy with wildlife. So thanks for letting me get that in, Kendall. I'll let you do what you got to do now.
Of course. No. Thank you. I'm going to hand it back over to both of you for closing comments. So I just want to thank you so much for being here. It was so fun to be able to compare all the different itineraries all at once. So thank you so much. Over to you for closing comments. We'll start with Drew.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to come kind of relive the glory of an Alaskan summer with you guys here today. It was really a ton of fun to go back and relive some of the memories from trips that I've led, and it really gets me looking forward to this summer and when the snow all melts and people can start coming back to Alaska again. So hope everybody's having a good time where you are, and we'll see you soon.
Well, Drew, I could not agree more. Thank you so much for joining me. It is so much fun to get to talk with you about this place that we both love so deeply. It's snowing here again. We lost the sunshine. So talking about Alaska summer is where it's at. And I have to say to our guests who are still watching, you cannot go wrong with any one of these itineraries. So if you're already signed up, you're signed up for the perfect trip and you're going to have an incredible time. For those of you who've already done one of these itineraries, then you could not go wrong to choose one of the other ones because they are that different. While you get that overland experience with the safari, you really zone into that marine environment on the Alaska Explorer, and you zone into the, Katmai Coast with the bear trip. So I think you should come do all of them. And I really appreciate you, signing on today to learn about this place that we're so in love with. And I get to see you guys next week, and I'm sure there's a daily dose tomorrow. So thank you so much.
Thanks again, you two. And my thanks as well to everyone who tuned in today. Do join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. We did record today's presentation, and we'll have the replay available on our website soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.